Hello and welcome to Explainable AI. I'm Paul Anthony Claxton and I'm your host. Today we're joined by Serg Masis from Syngenta, and we're going to be talking about the trust equation and building confidence in AI systems. Serg, would you like to take it from here and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Serg Masis. I've been in data science for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was in web and mobile development, app developer, entrepreneur, a bunch of different things. Overall, a technologist and someone curious about data in general. The way I got into explainable AI was through hitting that black box and figuring out I was hitting like a brick wall there, something I couldn't debug easily. And as someone that was always programming from a young age, that was really frustrating to find that. So yeah, I went down that rabbit hole, and then I ended up writing a best-selling book about it. I'm now in the second edition, and soon I'm going to have another one called Responsible AI that I'm co-authoring. And yeah, here I am, knee deep in that topic.
Hey, it's Rohan Hall. Hey, what if I were to tell you that there are thousands of potential clients that are looking for your specific expertise right now? The problem is they can't find you. It's not a problem with your expertise, it's a problem with your discoverability. And this is what we're working on right now at Osisha. If you'd like to learn more, just go to osisha.ai. That's OCESHA.ai to learn more, and feel free to join our early access program. We're going to be launching this in April of this year, 2026. Thank you. And now back to the program.
That's awesome. Thank you. Can you tell us the name of the first book that you wrote?
Interpretable Machine Learning with Python.
And then the new one is
Responsible AI. I think
okay.
there might be something else to the name. I'm not sure, but they can find it with when they look for my name, they'll find it there.
Okay. And they can find those on, I think you have a CV site. Is it surge.ai?
Actually, I haven't updated that, unfortunately, but they could find it in Amazon. They look for me in
Okay,
Amazon, they'll find
wonderful.
everything. Yeah.
Wonderful. Cool. That's awesome. I wanted to kick things off with a topic, particularly obviously around the title of the show. So we could start with maybe talking about how can organizations better engage their end users, whether that be external end users or internal end users. How can end users essentially become a better extension to the organizations so that in such a way that organizations are ensuring that end users have a sufficient understanding of how the AI systems that they're using work and how they're being promoted and what the underlying interactions and implications are.
I think with every technology, there is an aspect when it's new enough. I think it's indistinguishable. What was it with magic? I think that's the quote. And I think that's the case with AI. People are engaging with it, they're curious, they like it, but at the same time, there's hesitation because while it can do so much, when it fails, especially, there's always the question why. And when it succeeds, they still want to know. They want to know what's going on here. And it doesn't have to be at an extent where they have to know every like thing going on.
Yeah.
But I think the question why is a very important question to answer for an end user of any kind, because that's what underpins the trust they'll have in the system. If say you were like brand new to say the concept of cars, you've been riding
Mhm.
horses all your life, and you sat in a car and it started moving, you'd be a little freaked out. What is pushing this? What is
Yeah.
this? And then they explain to you the concept of internal combustion engine, and you'd be okay. That makes sense. That might be all it takes for you to trust the technology. And then you realize there's all this combustion going on and fire. Is that trustworthy? Is it this could explode? Who can tell me that's not going to happen? How can I get assurances of that? And part of it is about going down that rabbit hole and answering that question. And then realize that there's guardrails in place to protect you. And often that's what end users are looking for. They're just looking for an understanding that the technology is mature enough to be safe, and we can entrust them with the reason behind why it works. They're not children. They're not like, these things aren't hidden from them. There isn't in the Wizard of Oz like some guy behind a curtain and they're unaware of it. Like we have to unmask that, and that's an important part of the technology. I think it's a disservice to the technology when we hide these things, because I think companies, they want to keep the hype up, in the sense they want to make it seem like it's magical, but in the long run, that's a good thing. In the long run, that is going to erode the trust that people have in the technology, and that's why explainability is so important. And also making sure it's also on the road of doing all these other things, ensuring that technology is fair, ensuring that it's robust, ensuring that it has all the mechanisms in place so that it can be trusted in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. I like the analogy that you brought up about the car, because I use car analogies a lot. I'm a little bit of a car connoisseur. I have a Mercedes, but I love the analogy about the car, because AI is actually in many ways very much a vehicle that we might drive up and down the road. A vehicle will only go where you tell it to go. It will only do what you tell it to do.
Yeah.
But in the same instance, every driver is not a mechanic of a vehicle. Every driver, especially in today's age, vehicles come with their computers on wheels, right? Versus the cars of the 70s and the 80s, where your dad would get under the car and fix it with a couple of wrenches and hammers. But today you can't do that. So a lot of consumers of vehicles, they consume or they use, but they don't actually go and build the vehicle. They don't know how they work. You have to take it to a technician and mechanic for that. And I believe AI is very much metaphorically very similar. But when you're operating a 4,000-pound piece of machinery, you have to take in to consideration not just yourself in that machine, but everything around you that's moving at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. And then you have to take in what are the potential environmental effects of me using this machine, this vehicle. And I think AI is very much the same way.
Yeah. No, in presentations, actually, yeah, I like connecting it with a vehicle. I said car right now, but in presentations, I take it further. And the reason is, I think cars, as sophisticated as cars these days are, they're grounded. They're on ground. And humans are adapted to ground. We understand the physics of ground. It's at our eye level whenever we're in a car. It's more or less at our eye level. And so we can measure things like we understand the movement and the speed and things. Even looking at from an outsider, we see a car go by. We understand a lot of things about it. But I think it's closer to a plane, in the sense planes are out in the air. We're doing things we're not supposed to. It's not our domain to predict the future. It's not our domain to do all these things that we do with computers, with machine learning and AI. It's something out there, and there's a lot of uncertainty. As much as cars can be dangerous, like, it's a lot easier to keep things certain because they're on ground. With a plane, there's just so many different variables, and they're not really up to us. I feel it's the same way with AI. I like to tell people in my presentation, like, a lot of the tools I introduce people to, often for the first time, to explain their models, those tools are equivalent to all the stuff on the dashboard. It's not really called the dashboard, but in the cockpit, you see these hundreds of little tools. That's what you need to operate an AI system these days. You need all these knobs, all these different gauges. You need all that stuff to know that you're going in the right direction. Because not every day you fly the plane you'll find the clear blue skies. In the same way, you won't necessarily find that every day you operate an AI model. And I posed a question. Say it's the very beginning of the pandemic and you have a sales forecasting model, like you've never seen that scenario before. All the machine learning models that were operating on those days had no clue what was going on because they weren't anticipating that. And the tricky thing is, yeah, of course, if this was actually a plane, they would have grounded all the planes on that day. They would have said, no, it's not safe. But the hubris around AI and the hype means that we think, oh, yeah, sure, we can deal with that. No, you can't. You need to understand that you're operating somewhere we're not supposed to. And it's okay to say, we're going to ground the plane. It's okay to say, we're going to do it, but only in with these kind of restrictions. This is the scope we're going to use it for. That's okay. There's many examples where machine learning models have been repurposed for something else. Say maybe you had like a price prediction model for homes, and then you're using it to be able to tell users on your website, this is your estimated price of your home. Zillow did. That's the example I'm using. But one thing is to use it to give users more or less idea what their home is worth. Another thing is to say, okay, I'm going to use it to play Monopoly on an industrial scale. That's a completely different scenario. You need a lot more guardrails. You need very strict confidence intervals. It's a different ball game. So this is like saying, okay, I got this plane that is meant to do these routes under these scenarios, and now I'm going to send it to the Arctic, and I'm going to have it operate on a different scenario. You can't do that. So you have to understand those things in business scenarios. You have to understand where your AI models are competent and when they're not. And we see that these days, there's a lot of discussion of large language models and these concept of foundation models. And that's okay. But when you're repurposing a model for something else, you have to understand where the initial model can be used for. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to create my plane, and I'm going to repurpose these engines, these very powerful engines, from something else, and they can do anything. No, they can't. They were built for specific use cases, and you have to make sure that you're taking that into account when you're designing the rest of your plane. And that's the way I see it. I'm probably taking this analogy too far, but that's where I'm at with this whole thing. Like, caution is good. Caution is good in business when using technology that's the technology, that AI technology. It's okay. It's not deterministic. It never is going to be deterministic. It's a technology that is meant to be careful with. And it's probably always going to be the case because there's always a fairly big level of uncertainty that we'll have to deal with it, because the problems we use it for are problems that pretty much we couldn't probably use other things for it. So having the human in the loop, having uncertainty, quantifying uncertainty, all these things are very important to be able to operate it safely.
That's one thing, that human in the loop, that's one thing that I definitely want to hit on, because I think that's important when we talk about explainable AI. We look at AI as a machine. We do, like, everyone looks at AI as a machine, but it's really people, and it's people that make up the data. And so that brings to mind, like, you may have heard of like the 18th century chess game, the Mechanical Turk.
Yeah.
And everyone thought it was a machine, but there was really a small person underneath pulling little strings, and really it was human driven. So it's like the machine that we see with AI, we think it's a machine, but there's what I call microtaskers, people that fill out surveys, people that do repetitive tasks, so to speak, that feed the machine, or the Mechanical Turk behind the curtain, so to speak. And that's a big thing, I think, when we're talking about explainable AI, is when do we put the human in the loop? When do they judiciously need to be added in the loop or put out of the loop? How much interference or interaction do they needs to take place in terms of human to machine counterpart? Or are we completely okay with letting a machine function on its own in a particular scenario? For example, driving a car, or in the surgical room, in the emergency care surgical room. I don't think we're at a point of singularity where we're okay with just letting cars go down the road on their own without human, what I would call human monitoring, or not human assistance, but human monitoring in the scenario where there's a break glass in case of emergency, right? And with explainable AI, and as far as that's concerned, particularly with every organization embracing AI, I found that like statistics, there's plenty of statistics that say that like most people don't even know when they're using AI. So like, how do we get to the fine print of that? Because most people aren't reading the fine print. So ethics come into play, I think, with organizations that are, I think you said earlier, they're very secretive, right? Like they want you to think that AI is just some great thing, and it is a great thing, but they want you to think it's more than what it is, right? And they're painting it with a certain kind of color to get you to subliminally or subconsciously think about what they want you to think AI is. But there's ethics there, and most consumers aren't reading the fine print. So these are things that need to be addressed. You being an AI expert, what if you could address some of these issues or propose solutions? What would be your guidance there?
It's something that is pretty much done on a case-by-case basis. There's applications of technology that can be done. You could automate AI at 100%. It's going to take some extra effort. Like even with this self-driving car scenario, like we could make it 100% safe, zero fatalities, zero issues. The way it could be done is you have only it operate on grade separated roads, zero pedestrians, and all the cars are self-driving. Pretty much in that system, there's no way it can fail because you have the uniformity necessary for that to happen. And that would be a very efficient system. Okay. And honestly, I think humans, we're not well adapted for driving anyway. I honestly think it's a waste of time, to be honest. And probably the best scenario is no cars at all. Yeah, we have the grade separated for the like last mile trip scenarios, but most trips are done through trains and other kind of vehicles. But still, they could operate on their own. Like we already have around the world, there are already metro systems that operate entirely autonomously. So it's not science fiction at all. But I do think that for some scenarios, like you mentioned, like in the operating room, yeah, maybe AI can operate at a precision no way a human could. That's great. And if we deployed that technology like with a robot, we could have surgeons in the US or in Europe operate in Asia or Africa or wherever, Latin America. It wouldn't matter. It would reduce costs enormously if that was available. But you would have a level of automation and precision carried around by a surgical robot, but there would be a human present. So it would be tantamount to having the plane I was mentioning, and there's always a pilot. It's semi-automatic. Like some things you can trust the robot to do 100%. Maybe like the initial incision, maybe cauterizing a wound, or like actually closing it up, stitching it up, things like that. But then when it comes down to actually scoping some area inside a body and actually figure out what part of the organ is this, there might be it might be best for the human eye to look at that with like the microscopic lens in the robot to, oh, okay, I see what I'm doing and decide that. So I think there are like applications where it's probably best to leave it semi-automatic, and others where it's completely plausible to make the technology completely automatic. And then
I agree.
And I think that's not only like the ethical thing to do, it's also like the most efficient like business approach. Because when you're talking about ethics, people go down this idea of, oh, okay, we're going to be all goody two shoes and try to do something for the best of humanity, and that's going to be bad for business. But in reality, it completely aligns. Having transparency, having fairness, having robustness, it's close to what we already do with quality assurance with every technology. It's not good business when you're killing your customers. I don't know. It took the longest time to put seatbelts in cars, and I don't know why the big car companies didn't say, "Oh, this is stupid. We're killing our customers. This is bad PR."
Yeah.
I guess because this was pre-internet and the word traveled, people weren't adding things up and figuring out, okay, there's these many kind of car accidents and these many people being killed. So like now everything is so easy to find that information and get a little outraged, probably too outraged by these statistics. So I think the way technology is evolving, I think actually it's probably more likely that we end up with the contrary, like in the sense that we're actually more in tune to actually get more outraged by poor quality and dismiss a technology as potentially useful than actually consider a technology and allow it to develop, even despite all its flaws.
Definitely. I like the fact that you said that humans aren't really, they're not a good candidate for driving cars down the road. And I live in Southern California, and I can tell you, if you drive for even an hour in Los Angeles, you'll realize that's true very quickly. But that kind of made me think, I'm like, AI is not really a variable. It's not anymore. It's a constant. And to me, it's hard to monitor what is inconsistent, right? It's hard to monitor what's inconsistent. And I think we very much so society looks at AI as this variable factor, like something that has very fluctuating consistency, right? But that's not the case, because AI is always going on around us. And I was thinking like, why not make transportation a consistent? Almost when you go to a mall and you're on an escalator, or you go to an airport and you're on a walkway, those walkways and those escalators are always moving. That's why they call them people movers, right? Because in an airport, flights are always constant, right? And so I would look at transportation in much the same matter. Why couldn't we just create roadways that would consistently shift people and goods and services from point A to point B and C? And you would have onboarding and offboarding platforms for that. But I think that's a possibility, and you could a way to internationally or nationally automate transportation. So I think that could be a direction that we could head, because everybody is looking for different organizations, and people are trying to innovate in transportation, but it's all variable.
Yeah.
And so if we could add consistency, think about how that could improve explainability, how that could have a chain reaction of explainability for, say, for example, the logistics and supply chain system across America or across the world. And I think AI becomes difficult because we don't look at it as a constant. We have policy and regulators that want to put a stop to AI development, but does that really solve the root problem? The root challenges that we deal with?
I think AI doesn't operate in a vacuum. None of the technologies do. I think that the issue is that probably the bigger machine that kind of makes things actually go in one direction or another is the economy, right?
Yeah.
So, and the oil of that machine are incentives, right? So if the incentives don't align with the optimal purpose of the technology, won't go in the direction we want it to. So there are a lot of incentives that could be in a better place if we could trust our data and where it's going to, and we could share it freely because we know, oh yeah, this is going to work for all of us. If people, for some reason, they thought, okay, sharing my location to the government at all times because would be a good thing, because they're not going to do anything wrong with it. The only purpose is so they can figure out how to better make I don't know, like a supply chain like transportation system, so they can optimize, let's say, local and regional and national transportation networks. Let's say that was the goal. So like they said, we're going to do this, where everybody's going to share their data. So we can come up with this grand like transportation system for the 21st century. If that was the case, then people, if our incentives were aligned, then it would make sense to do this. But we can't trust that our and what happens, how are we going to get paid? Is the payment in the case of getting this system, getting our taxes work for us in the way we want it to? Or are they also coming in agreement? That's what we want, right? We want an optimal like supply chain transportation system. We want the economy to flow in the best direction. There's a reason why I think Amazon has managed to make an amazing supply chain system that they can get something to you in the same day, right? So for that to happen, he had to convince enough, the company had to convince enough people to buy into this Amazon Prime system and pay subscriptions. And the force of the market, he twisted the hand of UPS and FedEx and all these companies by saying, you want our business, you have to play by our rules. And so it ended up happening. But there's only so much the private sector can do without the right incentives from the government and the right infrastructure. So that's where regulation comes into play. That's where like public sentiment comes into play. That's where like the trust that I'm saying that technology has to come into play, because people don't realize, okay, for me to have this technology, I have to give up these rights, or I have to allow this or allow that. Then that's when the technology can be empowered by people's trust, because there's always a give and take. You're always giving something, whether you know it or not, in exchange for technology. Like
Definitely.
if I choose to drive my car, I know I'm giving up my freedom to actually just move my arms wherever I want while I'm driving. That's something I'm giving up, whether I'm aware of it or not. Like I know I'm giving up my freedom to be able to turn my head anywhere else except in front of the road, because these are things that kind of seem like they're pretty obvious, but that's the case with every technology. For this technology to work, me to be targeting a computer, I also, if giving up freedom of movement, I'm giving up a bunch of other things, like in a bit of my internet bandwidth, so many other things. And they're freely given because I'm trusting the technology, because I'm seeing it's worthwhile, because it's providing value for me. So that also, to get trusting in technology to the level that we take the things we give for it for granted, is one of the kind of stepping stones to actually enjoy the technology in the long run.
Yeah. And how much do you think consumers are willing to give in exchange? How much of their rights do you think they're willing to give up in exchange for this technology? That's what I wonder.
I wonder that too, but mind you, it can be confusing because there's always early adopters that would sign off their soul for anything that's brand new, for the shining new whatever. But it always gets to a point where you have all the people that are like hesitant, and you have to break through that group to be able to get to the critical mass that you need for the technology to have wide adoption.
It goes back to how venture capital works. You've got your heart and your soul put into this company, and you're going to give up X amount of it, and potentially, if things go wrong, lose your entire company for X amount of money. So that's a risk. And I wonder, what is it worth in the long run? You have Neuralink, Elon Musk's company. Just a week ago, they put the first brain chip into someone. And right now they're doing it for more of people with medical needs, severe needs, right? To help people out. But pretty soon it's going to become just general off the shelf, but only for the people that can afford it. So you kind of have like I think they call it the Cantillon effect, right? So it's like the differences between the haves and have-nots. What drives price in the market? right? And it's people that have, it's the people that create, it's the policymakers, it's the people at the top that create things or that endorse things that get access and ultimately drive price, but they get access to things first. They get access to the new products and whatnot first, which kind of creates like a monopoly effect, right? It creates a power dynamic in society that I think has pretty much existed since the Industrial Revolution, or probably even before. So when you talk about things like that and at what opportunity costs, I think about people getting access to brain chips, brain implants, chips. So you're integrating AI in your body. And I'm like, man, in 20 years, we could literally have real life human cyborgs walking the face of the earth, like very powerful people, not just financially or corporate power, but physically powerful people that have AI like intelligence in their body, right? That are
Yeah.
smarter than even the smartest humans that have Einstein that walked the earth, right? And so that creates a larger divide between the haves and the have-nots, because the have-nots cannot afford this physical implant technology. So that to me is can be a concern. It's a concern for me in terms of the people that are investing in these things. Yes, there's a good cause up front, but I think like with most inventions, there's a long-term there's a long-term damaging effect that happens like with overusage, right? And so the more people that you get using a product, the more saturated and less pure it is. I can take, for example, like social media when it first started was all about connecting with your family members. People, instead of having to write letters, you can now have a conversation like you and I are having, right? I can see you as if you were here in person. And you couldn't do that maybe 20 years ago or 25 years ago. But now social media is so much more than that. And I think it's less pure in a lot of ways because it's been soiled and saturated. And when you look at technologies and what they are, like I said, the Neuralink, they're doing it for people with maybe severe cases, severe illnesses. But down the road, as that becomes more consumerized, at what risk are we giving up our rights?
Yeah. No, there's a lot of ramifications from a technology like that when you think about it.
Yeah.
If you have a device inside of you that you control, but in a way can control you and your thoughts, like someone could literally hack your brain,
Yeah.
and that's not a great thing. So stands to benefit from that? I think in the long run, how do we ensure that's not a possibility? Especially we're talking about people that are vulnerable. If later on it's like pretty much everybody has it, it's like it's pretty much going to be the most protected product on the planet once billionaires have it implanted in their brain.
Yeah.
But I think I think to a certain extent, with social media, we've lost some authenticity. Like something like that, even in real life, it means we are also losing that, because when we meet someone anywhere, we have to wonder what's in their brain. Is it really them, or it's this other thing? That are they really as smart as they sound in real life, or this is just regurgitating something that they got from their
Yeah.
implant?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that's, especially with deepfakes, some people are calling this the year of the deepfake. We've seen the things happen in the news, like the Hong Kong company that was scammed out of 25 million by like a CFO, an AI fraudster posing as a CFO.
Yeah.
It's crazy. We've seen this stuff with Taylor Swift and other celebrities and whatnot. And there is a lot of negativity with deepfakes, but there's also some positive. Deepfakes can be used for positive endeavors, for positive assets. But right now, much of the news is negative around it. And I think when you talk about explainable AI, We need to start at a young age. I think that's important. The young age and the older crowd, the senior citizens, us in between are in a better spot. But the young ones and the older ones, there has to be something done with the fine print. There has to be a more intricate customer service between organization and consumer. And there has to be a deeper level of explaining or education done during the design process. Whose voices matter? All voices matter in the economic divide, because with AI, it's no longer the haves and the have-nots, as I've talked about before. But one decision in AI could destroy us all, right? It's almost like the wildfires in California, right? It's when it's really dry during the summer months of the year, during the fall, just one flick of an ash of a cigarette could start an entire wildfire. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live. And I kind of look at AI as very much the same way. And going back to our driving a car analogy, just because you can drive a car doesn't mean you understand how it works. But on the flip side, just because you can design an AI system doesn't mean that you are designing it, within best practice. And so I think those things are important. And I definitely think that we need like I said, a better integrated customer service process with organizations. I think customer service has just gotten abysmal with organizations these days. So I think every organization should have a dedicated AI customer service department, because we have to face it. Consumers are not going to read the fine print. And when they don't read the fine print, they will misuse AI. They will use it in ways for unintended or potentially malintent consequences, producing malintent results, or resulting in unintended consequences. And it's bigger than just you and me, right? It's everyone that we interact with. It's everyone that comes down the line and before. And so I think those things are important when you talk about like opportunity costs. What do you think? Is there a way to kind of, particularly with like deep fakes, is there a way to create more explainability so we can maybe prevent some of these deep fakes from happening?
Some of these technologies are even from an explainability standpoint fairly opaque.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't have access to the intrinsic model parameters. If all I have an output of a model, how can I know it's fake? There are some traces of watermarks, things you could do. You could have a model try to predict if it was fake or not. And we have models for that, but it's almost like a never ending, how do you call that? Like you're always going to have a cat, like a whack-a-mole kind of scenario with these things.
Yeah.
And so that's where regulation can step in and say, okay, make a global law of likeness. Like your likeness is your property, right?
Uh-huh.
And people may not misuse it anywhere, right? Whether you like it or not, what does that mean? It means that everybody's going to have, if they want to be protected, they'll have to have some kind of scan done on their face and have that in some kind of international database. It can be anonymous. It can be put in blockchain and nobody knows your real identity, but they know you exist. You've been verified as a real human being. So when your likeness is used somewhere in that blockchain ledger, there'll be someone that's associated to it and say, hey, this has not been sanctioned by this person. This use over here. So immediately that means that content has to be taken down, or there has to be some kind of notice that says, this is fantasy. This is not real. I'll give you an example. You have an address by President Biden. Biden is in that database, of course. And in his case, he's a public figure. So like we could anonymize the blockchain data, but there's really no point. Everybody's going to look at it and say, oh, it's Biden. So what happens then? It happens that like pretty much any like verified image of him, maybe the Secret Service can sift for every image and say, okay, that was him. that was him here, that was him there, and verify every known image. And anything that doesn't fall part of that is suspect, right? Including
Yeah.
anything new, especially something new. So if a new video pops up and it's not verified to be him, it's going to be suspect. The flip side is that you do it the other way around, right? You don't assume everything's a deep fake unless it's part of a known like database of real footage, but rather you don't suspect that. You try to you give it the benefit of the doubt, right? And it goes through a process where whoever publishes has to prove that it's real, which is, I think, tricky. But we'll have to come up with technologies like that to avoid deepfakes. In a way, it's the sort of thing that has to be broken before we feel we need to fix it. It's unfortunate, but there's going to have to be a lot of cases of companies being ripped off and people being ripped off before governments think, okay, we have to step in. So I don't see any other, or I don't see a private enterprise taking a challenge like that, because it has to be, for it to work, it has pretty much has to be global.
Yeah. One of my AI advisors for my VC fund, he leads one of Intel's AI divisions. His name is Joe Mayberry, but he published a great article. It's a great read. I'll share it with you on LinkedIn about vision transformers and how they can kind of work to our benefit over convolutional neural networks. And I was thinking about explainability and preventing the whole deepfake thing, or at least mitigating it. And I was thinking that could really move us forward tremendously in terms of helping kind of, fizzle, helping to cool down this whole deepfake epidemic. But then again, it's also awareness. Like I started before, the younger and older generation, we have to create awareness. We have to educate. We have to talk about this, because just like in cybersecurity, a lot of attacks, quite frequently, a lot of attacks happen from inside the organization, the social engineering. And in a way, I think there's the social engineering aspect to deepfakes. So today, you can look at a deepfake and then you can look at the real person, and you can tell, if you're aware, if you're educated on deepfakes and what to look for, then you can tell the difference. Most people can't. But pretty soon, AI is going to get so good, we won't be able to tell the difference. Oh, and by the way, deepfakes don't have to be a person. You can have a deepfake of anything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it could be a deepfake of a mascot, a branded character.
Yeah.
I was discussing this very same topic with my brother, whose expertise is in extended reality, and we're saying, I think there'll be a marketplace for people that want to look like a celebrity, and they'll pay for it, and celebrities will be fine with it, but they have to trust the technology first. So he said, okay, you want to be me for a day, you pay for my likeness for a day, but it's clear to everybody that you're not me. And somehow it has to be known in wherever you are that this is someone pretending to be me, but not me. Whether that's a blue check mark that is missing, or all the contrary, there's something that you carry around that says, okay, fake. Something that people can see that, oh, that's not really Jennifer Lawrence or whoever.
Right. So if you and I are here talking, and I rented like Brad Pitt's image for a day, and so like you're talking to Brad Pitt right now.
Yeah, but it's somewhere in the Zoom. This is not Brad Pitt. He might be fine with that, I think, as long as he's getting paid for it.
Would be. I'm sure he would be if he gets enough money for it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but maybe amongst like the part of the digital contract that is written in the blockchain that says, okay, this can be done for this much for private people, but recording is not allowed. Hence, it can't be used for movies or anything like that. Or maybe it is allowed, but then the price is so high, might as well pay for the real thing.
I want Brad Pitt to be like me, rent my image. Yeah, that's very interesting. And we're definitely headed that way. There's so many things we can do with AI. What I encourage everyone to do is to definitely go past the glitter of AI. Now, I think we've made it obvious that With every invention, there's a disaster, right? So you wouldn't have car crashes, plane crashes if there were no cars or planes. There is the collateral damage that takes place with every invention. That's just life. That's just the nature of evolution. So you can't really get around that. But I do encourage people to look not for, I'm going to put a spin on this. Don't ask what AI can do for you. Ask what you can do for AI. So better than AI. Let's be better than AI. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that there is the things that we don't see. And if you truly want to understand AI from explainability, and you truly, we're talking about trust as well, right? In AI. So if you want to be able to trust AI, you have to understand it, which means that you have to dig deep. Don't just go on Chat GPT or Bard and think the AI. Read some books, take some trips. That's my suggestion. And understand what it takes to produce AI. There are mines the size of small cities in the Western US, in places like Nevada, that these big tech companies don't really talk about because it's not popular. It's not to their benefit to really talk about this. And look and see what it takes to produce an electric car. What does it take to compute all of the data that we're putting in to the millions of photos on Facebook, all of the prompts, the billions of prompts on Chat GPT and so forth. So think about that.
Indeed. Yeah, like the externalities are pretty high. I think that's something that's been missing also in other discussions. I think, well, like technology is great, but the way we go around powering it and using it is backwards. Like I give you an example. Like it used to be like this thing with when the blockchain was at the height of the craze. I think it was using more energy than Ireland. Maybe I'm wrong, but in a big country, fairly big country, millions of people.
Yeah.
And I know AI is already way past that. Like in terms of like what is used by the data centers is huge. And I figured that's a waste of energy. We're talking about the technology that data centers, you could put data centers anywhere. You don't have to necessarily put them like wherever they are, like Texas and Virginia and whatever. The reason they're put there is because the local governments incentivize putting them there. And they don't really care if the energy that's being used to power them is coal or whatever it is. They don't really care because it's all about attracting jobs and all that because the incentives aren't there. But it doesn't really make sense for data centers are growing exponentially. So it doesn't make sense to put them in places where the energy cannot possibly keep up. Like even if you multiply them and put them across the country, like it makes sense to spread them out because of course you need data closest, more or less close to the people, but not, it doesn't have to be right next door either. So to me, it makes sense to like anywhere you put a data center, have a nuclear power plant next to it, have something that can actually keep up with it. And it can be in the middle of the desert, right? To me, or geothermal energy, something that can truly keep up. A lot of there's a movement to create like green like data centers, and a lot of them they're actually using geothermal. They're going to Iceland and places like that because they know there's enough energy deep in the ground to kind of power it for decades to come. I think it does make sense to take that approach. They can be in remote places, and that's one externality less. Of course, that doesn't cover like the mining. Like, we still have to figure that out, how to mine all these rare earth minerals that we need for not only data centers, but also like solar energy and all these other things like cars with the batteries and green energy in general. So I think we still have to figure out these questions because like the optimal answer to a lot of these things isn't we're just gonna turn a blind eye to what's bad about it and we're just gonna promote it nonetheless. I think there's we have to see there's a nuanced discussion behind everything. And I think so far, you could always argue going down one route is always, even if it's slightly better than another, what we're already doing is still worthwhile. But I think we could do a lot better than that, is especially now that we have the technology we have, we could actually harness the power of AI to help us make these decisions. It's already been used for route planning. It's being
Yeah.
used for really complex problems. Why not help it tackle climate change? Why not help it tackle all these things that are truly troubling us? Food shortages and geopolitics. There's just so many things we could probably have it help us with. Human in the loop, of course, but the main problem is, I think, with having it tackle those big problems is having people all align towards that goal. People are like the biggest impediment to progress, I believe, unfortunately. So it goes back to what you said about social engineering. We're the weakest link in any system. But
Yeah,
don't tell the
definitely.
robots. Don't tell the
Definitely.
robots I said so. I'm sorry.
That definitely. And the other thing is too, before I mention, it's important that we take every decision seriously, because even the smallest, even the smallest choices at the consumer level or the organizational level can have like demonstrable effects, right? Both positive and negative, right? And I'll take, for example, like we're talking about trust, and we're talking about things like bias and ability and whatnot. And I'll take, for example, red apples and green apples. If you only train a system on, say, red red apples to recognize red apples, then what about the green apples? And so the system, when you ask to see an apple, the system is only going to show you red apples. The system won't show you green apples. And it may seem like a small thing to talk about red apples and green apples, and that is a type of bias, by the way. So bias doesn't always have to be race or gender or something like that, but it can be something as simple as the difference between red and green apples. So if you're only seeing red apples, the long-term effects of that could be devastating. I actually did some research on this. Humans probably wouldn't die off. Certain things would be affected, leading to shifts in like food consumption patterns and whatnot. Agriculture, economy, the agriculture and the economy would see negative consequences from this, especially in regions where green apples are vital for production, or potentially leading to changes in farming practices and whatnot. Additionally, animals and that depend on certain food systems around like green apples, they would be affected. While it may not be a term like affecting us, something like that may not affect us at the level of extinction, but definitely it would have noticeable effects in a negative way, right? And so biodiversity would suffer majorly, as well as the economy and agriculture. That's just an example of something very, what we would probably think is trivial. In the long run, it's not so trivial. And I think these things are important because humans are going to be living longer. Life expectancy is increasing. And so we're going to be here for a lot longer, I think. And we want this to be an inhabitable place, and a place that we can all live. So those are kind of my thoughts. Serg, and I think we've been at it. I could go on all day about AI and everything that's happening. I think it's a great space to be in. But in closing, did you have any kind of closing thoughts about our conversation today, or maybe any areas that we missed, or if you wanted to kind of cover any real world scenarios or things going on in AI?
I think that the one thing that is happening and has me super excited is like this, for lack of a better word, like a revolution. Like so many people passionately working in the space, delivering these pretty cool products, mostly in generative AI, but it's getting all kinds of people excited. It's not just the content creators and people in media and writers and the sort of people that would use it for work. It's also other folks that are just, oh, they're excited. They can already just type some text and get an image created, something they could never draw in a million years. Or they can write, but they're like shy about it and figure now I can finally, because the mechanics of it, like going through all the brainstorming is difficult. So they start to use like AI as this brainstorming partner, and all of a sudden, like it unleashes all this creativity. So we have a lot of people that are benefiting from that. And then people that are more like on the programming side, they're figuring now I can use it to automate a lot of tasks in my life, right? How can I use it at home? How can I use it to make me more productive at work? And what I see happening is, as I said, a revolution in that space. Similarly to what we saw early in the early days of the internet, a lot of people taking the technology in their own hands and creating their own websites, for better or for worse. And I think that can actually help break the technology in. Breaking it in is super important because as it comes out, it doesn't quite fit us. It's like we're sticking our feet in that shoe and we're like, it's not quite right. But we need people to break it in with us. We need everybody, as many people as possible, because that's how we make it fit our lifestyle in the long run and fit our use cases and our problems, real problems that people have. So I think, and also cover any shortcomings. So I'm excited about it, which is why my next book has nothing to do with the kind of books I've been writing in the past. The way it's connecting is the fact that I think responsible AI is not going to be possible, and explainability is not going to have a use case unless we make it for everybody, unless we make it inclusive. So inclusivity is key. So my next book is called Do It Yourself AI. And it's for this group of people, whether you already work as a data scientist or you're like a hobbyist or an enthusiast and you can program a bit, like this book is for you. It's just to get your feet wet into things that are pretty a little bit outside of your comfort zone. How do you make a deep fake or a facial recognition system? How do you make a chatbot? Like the idea is to get this technology out there so people realize they can do so much with it. They don't have to rely on necessarily companies to come around and do it for them. They can take the technology in their own hands.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. Do-it-yourself AI has to be how do I say this? It has to be like a culture. It has to be a practice just in terms of consumerism. Because see, we can't really consumerize AI like what we're trying to do unless we open source it, unless we allow utility. With I think we've seen that in many other industries as well. Say, for example, like maybe IKEA, right? So you kind of go into the store and you pick out what you want and you build your own furniture. Or say, for example, maybe buying some cloth and material and stitching your own garment, so to speak. But there are guidelines on how to do that. There are instructions on how to do that. And I think that's the important piece that maybe is being missed in the efforts to regulate AI, because there will come a time where the government will say, you can't do this with AI, you can't do that. But right now it's pretty much free reign.
Yeah.
But there will come a time as governments look to regulate. And one thing that I don't think is happening that should be happening is how AI is used, not necessarily in how it's built, but how it's used. Just like with guns in America, you can go and purchase various types of guns, and there's less regulation in terms of how those guns are manufactured, but there's more regulation in terms of how those guns are used, right? And so I do think that at various levels of utility, you should have to have a license to use AI. I believe that you should have to have a government ID number, kind of like a social security number, where everybody has like a profile, so to speak, that tracks back to them. But users have to be held accountable. And I think when users are held individually accountable, not just organizations, but users, then we will start to see changes. Then we'll start to see some kind of order here when each and every individual is held accountable. Because right now, I can go and probably create, if I wanted to, I could probably create a deep fake myself. Or now, would I do that? No. I want to make that clear that I'm all about ethics and AI for good. But I'm just saying that anybody can do this. It's not hard.
Yeah.
So it's like you go on YouTube and figure out how to make a bomb. That's literally how easy it is to do this stuff. And AI it's that powerful. It's like a bomb. So
Yeah.
I think we need to think of it like that. And I really appreciate your time today. And
My
yeah,
pleasure.
it's been a good chat. I really enjoyed this. And definitely, if you haven't gotten Serg's books, go get them and connect with Serg on LinkedIn too.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks,
Appreciate
Serg.
it.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Let me stop.